Hi mathematicians, Dr. PB here. And before you continue, please make sure that you have all of these materials so that you can fully engage with the video. So first, you should see that you need a blank copy of the handout. You need a pencil. And you need all 6 of the colors that are available as highlighters in your material supply bins. So if you don't have all these items, please pause the video and then restart once you've got everything together and you're ready to go. Alrighty, so hopefully we have everything and we are ready to go. In this video, we are going to go through what is a histogram, and it's a way to display data. And if you look at the template at the bottom, you can see that the histogram looks a lot like a bar chart, and they're very, very similar. But while a bar chart can have bars that represent just one category, for example, you could think of how many bears do I have? How many kids like ice cream? Your bars could represent a category. Histograms represent data that are in intervals. And each of these is an example of an interval because it represents numbers that could fall between 2 different pieces of data. And I think once you see an example, it'll make perfect sense. Now would be the time for you to grab a blue highlighter if you have, which you hopefully have nearby. And I'm going to look in my first interval. My first interval means I'm looking for numbers that fall between 40 and 50. And if I look at my set of data, which represents the number of days it takes for different tomato plants to produce tomatoes. So this is a very real life topic for those of us that are going to be in the ag pathway. We would look at our table of data and we would see that we have that this tomato plant took 47 days before it started growing tomatoes. And that is the only number that falls within this interval. So frequency tells us how many. So how many plants fell within the interval between 40 and 50? Well, just this one. So I am going to write the number 1 here in my frequency because I only had one piece of data that fell between 40 and 50 into that interval. So now I'm going to grab my green highlighter and I am going to determine how many plants took between 50 and 60 days. So you can see that I have these right here that clearly fall between 50 and 60. Now, you're going to learn over this school year that you're in my class. If I write anything that's in red, that means that it is wrong, okay? So, and I do things in red sometimes to make sure that you're aware of very common mistakes that happen a lot. And one very, very common mistake would be including this 60 inside of this intervals that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of data. So again, red means no. This is incorrect. And the reason it's incorrect is because mathematicians basically got together and said, wait a second, what if I have the same number that's at the end of one interval, but it's at the beginning of another interval? And what mathematicians decided to do is that if you have a number that falls at the end and at the beginning of another interval, we're going to put it in the one where it's in the beginning. So I know that's confusing. Sometimes math certainly can be. That's why I'm warning you in advance. That 60 is not going to go here. Okay, so that means that our frequency for this piece of data is 4 because we have 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers that fall within that interval. Now grab your pink highlighter for the next interval. So we've already established that that 60 is going to go here. And then we've got our other data points that fall, in between 60 and 70. Remember, we are not going to include the 70 in this interval because that 70 in a minute is going to go down into the next interval where the 70 is in the front. So that means that this frequency has 9. This interval has 9 pieces of data in it. So how many? The frequency is 9. Next, let's do our orange. And so we've got these pieces of data that fall within the interval of 70 to 80. But again, remember, we are not going to include that 80. So that means that this frequency is also 9. Next, we're going to start our next interval, that 80 to 90. And we're going to use our yellow highlighter. So I've got these values that fall in that interval between 80 and 90. So my frequency should be 6. And then finally, I have one last piece of data, which will be the only one that will go in this interval. And so once again, this frequency is 1. So if you need to take a minute, pause the video if you haven't already. Make sure that you have your frequency table done correctly. And then restart the video when you're ready to go. If you're ready to proceed, though, let's go ahead and let's do it. So we've gone ahead and drawn the bars that represent each piece of data here. And so you'll notice that your first interval was between 40 and 50. And the frequency for our interval of 40 and 50 was 1. So that is why the bar for the interval between 40 and 50, as you can see, its height is 1 unit high. If you look, it matches up with the 1. And the reason it does that, again, is because the interval between 40 and 50 had 1 piece of data that fell in that interval. So that makes the bar 1 unit high. I know you probably have a good idea where we're going next. So my second interval between 50 and 60 had 4 pieces of data in it. So if I look down at my histogram, the bar that is between 50 and 60, because it had 4 pieces of data in it, this bar is 4 high. See how it lines up with the 4? And again, that's because our frequency was 4. There were 4 pieces of data that fell within there. And then you can see where we're going. So next, I'm going to do my next interval, which is between 60 and 70, and had 9 pieces of data that fell in there. So that is why that bar is 9 units high. Then you see our next interval was 9 high. So that takes care of our next bar. Then next we have a frequency of 6. So that yellow bar is 6 high. And finally, our last interval was 1 unit high. or I'm sorry, our last frequency for that interval was 1 piece of data. So this bar will be 1 unit high. So there you have it, your first introduction to a histogram. By all means, if you have any questions whatsoever, please do not hesitate to let me know.